right. Hello and welcome to this live stream. My name is Frank Lavinia. You can catch me at the following URLs: franksworld.com, datadriven.tv, and even impactquantum.com. Um, so, for those of you wondering just what the heck is going on, um, it's been an interesting week in AI, which is saying something because it's been an interesting year. It was basically about 12 months ago, almost to the day, that ChatGPT was released, and OpenAI effectively became a household name. And what's particularly interesting about this is the political machinations of the last week or so. And I hope I sent the invite to Andy. Hopefully he'll be able to join the stream. But I wanted to stream because one, Thanksgiving is coming up, and it's not going to be very long before I'm going to be drafted into service for getting the turkey going. And but I would be remiss if I didn't kind of talk about what's going on. So you'll for readers of the blog franksworld.com, you'll notice that it was actually kind of quiet the last week, and part of that has been my main machine, which is right off there to the side of the camera, my main at least blogging machine or whatever, had a catastrophic hard drive failure last Friday. Last Friday was a day of deferred maintenance. Because this broke, something else in the house broke, and I kind of lost track. Today, which is in the United States a logical Friday because tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and most people have Friday off, is effectively a 3-day week, and so I've had two catastrophic failures, which is part of why I wanted to live stream, now. Was my Outlook email stopped working. So for those you don't know, I have an Office 365 tenant, right? So because I used to work at Microsoft, I can still shop at the Microsoft prices and things like that. But the subscription had expired and I just didn't get to it. And so all of a sudden I get a message from my wife saying, "Hey, what happened to the email? It didn't work." And I'm like, "That's weird. It's in the cloud. It's supposed to magically work." Famous last words. Turns out that the subscription had expired. So I re-upped the subscription, but there was some kind of glitch because I don't think I added it properly, or there was some kind of other disconnect. And I had to call support, which kudos for them because the support people called me within half an hour. Like it was kudos to them and kudos to the support agent that helped me walk through this and kind of explain how the prepaid subscription system works and things like that. I also encourage the ticketing agent to totally check out the company store because it's probably the best deal. Office 365 is probably the best single deal, or excuse me, M365 is probably the best deal on the site. So I think it's important to kind of talk about what's been going on. Now, last I heard, Sam Altman is now back at OpenAI, which is got to be an awkward conversation. In fact, one of the funniest things I've seen here was a post by a former colleague of mine at the MTC, basically saying, if you think going to your in-laws or your family for Thanksgiving is awkward, here's the actual quote. He shared it. It's let me share it on my screen. Yeah, I'll just share the entire screen. If you are anxious about seeing that one family member at Thanksgiving tomorrow, it can't be as awkward as Sam Altman having to re-meet with his board for the first time. Now, that is kind of a humorous take on it, and it's interesting because I'm not really sure. I haven't followed it. It's really been like a soap opera, right? This has been like Game of Thrones. Like, you just catch the latest episode, except it's unfolding in real time. And we can all kind of make jokes about it and things like that, but I think it undercuts um, a very serious concern, and that is the fact that all of this innovation is locked away behind one company, right? Um, Arguably, kind of two companies, because Microsoft obviously has a certain amount of sway. I think, as we saw, um, with the board. But there's also there's a very real. Oh, I have a dog visiting me on the stream. That's very nice. I lost my train of thought. Oh, had it not been for Microsoft's ability to kind of put pressure on the board, I'm not sure how this would have played out. Certainly wouldn't have played out as quickly. Um, there was a meme of Satya Nadella as Bane, basically going to the Bane from the Batman movies, saying, "Do you feel in charge?" to the OpenAI board. Um, I'm not exactly sure what happened there. And I think this undercuts a very critical point of failure. And the critical point of failure is having all of this innovation kind of locked up inside of one company, um, without any kind of oversight, or control. I mean, a lot of this is driven by all. We don't know what really drove this, right? And Elon Musk has made an interesting point, to which I know people love Elon or they hate Elon, but I would say the important part to take away is the simple fact that we the public kind of deserves a right to know about what happened to precipitate all of this. Like, why was he fired? There's various rumors, more plausible than others. The one to me that carries the most weight, and let me know in the comments if you think I'm completely off, which, it happens from time to time, is the fact that he did create effectively an app store, and he was rushing full on for a monetization strategy. The less believable fringe theory, is that that he was hiding some kind of artificial general intelligence that the company had built. We don't really know, honestly. And it's just conjecture and rumor. However, what is conjecture and rumor is that if you take on a dependency, oh, awesome. So Andy is here. Hello, sir.
Frank,
How are you?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. We are live, and now we can make this an official show.
That's true. I'm sorry. I was out. I was out actually watching Stevie do some body work on a van he's repairing.
Oh, very cool.
And I thought so. Yeah, I thought it's kind of neat what he's doing there. Let's see. I see my camera's moved a little. Let me adjust that. It didn't help as much as I hoped.
That's hey, okay. Have I showed you this? Let me hide the chat so my screen will be bigger. Check this out. Is it going to work? There we go. It may be out of frame.
It is.
My holographic display. Let's see.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah, you showed it to me.
There we go.
I love that. And so, are you able to program those images?
I am actually. So nice. If you go, very festive. It comes with a bunch of videos that are kind of built in.
That is so cool.
I was going to mount it to the wall.
I'm going to fix my background.
I was going to mount this to the wall, but I think the coolest part is being able to see behind it, right? Because that's what makes it a quote unquote hologram. It's not really. Yeah, so this is one that I loaded.
I got you.
A robot. And then I have a data-driven one.
That is so cool.
Which I think I just discovered a typo in it.
Oh, no. Typos happen.
So for those who've been watching on the stream, you'll have to hear me tell this joke again. But I think that, I can, start the official recording now, I guess, but, what'll end up in the episode. So I think it'd be remiss for us not to take a break for Thanksgiving without mentioning the madness of the last week in the OpenAI world. In a year that has been very intense for this company. I mean, it's been about a year now since they released ChatGPT to the public, and it's become a household name. OpenAI is a household name. Sam Altman, well, certainly this week he's a household name. Prior to the last week, he was definitely a well-known name. And kind of just how quickly this has spiraled out of control. And to keep true to the title of the live stream and the title of the podcast episode is really kind of I think this highlights the importance of open source in this technology, right? And we had some internal meetings about completely other things, but obviously since this is I'm in AI, I work on the go-to-market for a particular AI product. When OpenAI sneezes, kind of everybody gets a cold. I don't know where I was going with that analogy, but in that spirit, I will share this here. And for those that are listening, and because it is Thanksgiving and let's be festive. Oh, look at that. The title of the top news story is Sam Altman returns to OpenAI. But Jimmy Simmons, who's a senior principal team leader in AI and machine learning engineering at Chick-fil-A, that's an interesting. We should see if we can get him on the show. Because if you are anxious about seeing that one family member at Thanksgiving tomorrow, it can't be as awkward as Sam Altman having to re-meet with the board for the first time. Which
that is a fair point.
And I just think it kind of underscores just how surreal this was, and I jokingly said I can't wait for the Netflix and Hulu adaptation, because I think what's her name, Elizabeth Holmes, her story had, I think, at least 3 treatments. One was on Hulu, one was on Netflix, and I think the third was on HBO Max. But I mean, it's just interesting how I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how this unfolds. Right. And what are your thoughts on this? Because I know you and I have been talking. I've had kind of system issues and deferred maintenance issues plaguing me since last Friday.
Yeah.
So folks may have noticed the blog may not have been as active and things like that. But what's your take on this? Because we haven't really kind of delved too deep into this.
We really haven't. First, I'll say good work on getting your machine back up.
Well, thank you.
That was cool. And excellent thoughts that I won't share. You can share once you get them going, but there's some really cool thoughts about automation. Frank uses a lot of automation to support his blog, and that's one of the reasons he's able to crank out so many posts a day. I'm jealous. I use these, but thoughts on Sam Altman.
You do have access to the source code.
I know. So, okay, I know. I know. It's super cool. I keep threatening to go do it, and I never do. I think I have downloaded the source at one point, so it's good stuff. The Sam Altman thing, that was, I mean, first, it's just weird. Second, I'm sure we don't know everything that's transpired. I suspect this because I left a partnership back in 2015 that, I had co-founded, and nobody knows that whole story as well. So it's, I'm sure there's more to this. I don't really know what's going on, but except what I've read and what you've read, he was removed by the board. That's never a pleasant experience for anyone. And frankly, it's one of the reasons why I'll never have a board. I have friends. And my friends me.
And you have to wonder, right? Because that is such an extreme act. Because it's such an extreme motion, you have to wonder what kicked that off. Now I know there's a guy named Ilya who has his he's saying things, and again, I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
the Hulu adaptation and possibly an audiobook out of it. I don't know what's going to go. I've heard rumors ranging from credible to absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
The most credible one I heard was that the rationale behind this was that Sam Altman had done the dev day and was pushing hard on, for lack of a better term, an app store for GPTs.
Yeah.
The less credible, and there's probably hundreds of these rumors, was that Sam Altman was hiding the development of an artificial general intelligence that the company had built, which I think is
I'm with you. That seems out there.
And I mean, maybe, I don't know, like we don't know. And I think it's particularly, the timing was really awkward too, because the week before this happened was he did the announcement of basically their app store and how to build your own. And then the following week was Microsoft Ignite, which is a major Microsoft conference. You were actually out at PASS, and which was I know it was at the same time, but was it also in the same convention center?
No, they were, I believe, on the campus, but I'm not positive of that with Ignite.
Okay.
And I say they weren't at the convention center. They may have been. I'm not really sure where they were.
Right.
And there's like two halves of the Washington State Convention Center. And I wasn't paying that much attention, I'm sorry to say.
Well, that's a huge building. Like, as convention centers, even by convention center standard, it's pretty big.
Yeah.
Like it's,
yeah.
But
they may have been close, because I saw people speaking at both.
Right.
There were several MVPs out there at speaking and attending both. I'm no longer an MVP, in case people wonder. It was voluntary, but
I was just saying that was by choice. Like, I know that.
Yeah.
I know that much.
Yeah, I didn't get kicked out. But despite, doing several things that probably should have gotten me kicked out, but I wasn't. But it's it was a lot going on at both conferences. There were kind of like co-announcements. I don't know how they coordinated all of that, but I'm glad they did. And some interesting stuff came out of that as well. So interesting advances I stayed at the PASS Summit. And I was only there really for about 48 hours. It goes on the main conference goes on for 3 days, and there's events that happen every night and that sort of stuff. Then there's 2 days of pre-conference presentations that are kind of focused, and you pay a little extra for those. But I mean, it's just a lot happening around that time. And yeah, the summit was, I don't know about Ignite, but the summit was going on Friday. It was Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And so, yeah, the timing is odd. And it's coming right up on the holidays. A number of people, stretch the holidays by taking time off before. And it's always a slow news week. Today, Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, 2023, is a very slow day. There's just not much traffic happening on social media. I'm glancing at it. I'm actually using today to transcribe notes. So, and stuff that I've been meaning to do for months. So
cool.
But yeah, it's weird. I agree with you, Frank. There'll probably be more information that comes out later, and it'll probably be somewhat accurate and more clarifying. I don't know if we'll ever get the whole story. The news this morning was that he's going back.
Yeah, that's what I saw on my feed, that he is.
Yeah.
That's got to be an interesting conversation, right? Like,
right. Yeah. Talking to, I'd seen the one guy who is, all I remember about the story was that he was working on a competing engine called Poe.
I hadn't heard anything about that in a while.
Yeah. So I had heard the couple of things that I read and went, maybe, was that guy, the guy that did the Poe thing, he was kind of a co-opetition with Sam and OpenAI. And the other one was that guy Ilya stirred up the pot. Those are just rumors that I read. I don't put a lot of credence in that sort of stuff. but he was definitely Sam was definitely fired. And when he left, a lot of the top people left, and
Right.
then
Something
you
like
know, and
90% of the company, like out of a 700
90%
person company,
threatened to leave if they didn't
threatened to
bring him
leave. Yeah.
back. Yeah, I wonder.
Which
I wonder
is,
what's going on with the 10% when I see a number that large.
well, it's always like when you hear like commercials, like 4 out of 5 dentists agree, like, is there like a radical 20% that
Yeah.
just
So
refused
I mean,
nonconformist
I don't,
dentist
and I'm not
population?
judging. I'm just curious. Um,
Yeah,
but
there's a
yeah.
lot. There's a lot to the history because, like, I think you and I shared this, and I think I even mentioned this, but there's another podcast out there called I'm gonna blank on the name. It's totally embarrassing. But they did a 3 hour deep dive into the history of NVIDIA and how NVIDIA got to this point.
I'm going to blank on that too, but it was
It's a
incredible.
it was an incredible. It's like 2.5 hours of a listen. Sounds like it would be painful, but it was actually quite
It was very good.
acquired. That's it.
That's it. I was looking.
Um, and it's called NVIDIA and the Dawn of the AI Era. But part of it, tangential to that, was a whole story about how OpenAI was founded,
Yep.
and how certain people had, Elon Musk probably being the most notable of them, was very disaffected or disenfranchised with how the company had turned out. So he kind of backed away from it.
Yep.
But I think for me, this last week has, I don't know, obviously I work for a company that made its, you know, way on open source
Hmm.
technology. So obviously I'm going to have an opinion that's kind of, and I am a convert to open source. I will admit that, right? I wasn't always a strong proponent of it, but
Well, both of us, right?
both of
And
us,
and to
right?
be
Like,
fair, we were Microsoft people when open source was a dirty word.
right. It was a 4 letter word, so to
Right.
speak. But what's interesting about this is the engineer in me always looks for single points of failure and tries to
Sure.
mitigate those risks, right?
Hmm.
Ironically, the same day that happened, my single point of failure. It's not true.
Which
I did have alternate machines. I could obviously clearly I have more than one computer in my house.
to
But
to be fair, it was a great alert.
it really was. I mean, I did lose some data, but I didn't lose I didn't lose anything
Right.
like uh critical, because I did have backup systems in place thanks to a
Right.
previous epic fail. Um Big shout out to the hosting company, ClearDB, who cleared me out. Um
uh
boom boom. But what's interesting about this in particular is, you know, while I'm trying to figure out what the heck is going on, because this is one of those new, haven't really built a system. Unlike you, I haven't built the system um in the t- in the 2010s, right? So I haven't built the system in a while. So a lot has changed. So in
yeah.
this particular case, I opened it up and I'm like, oh, I'll just get the hard drive out. Couldn't find the flipping hard drive. Right? I'm like,
Well,
where
you
is it?
showed it to me. You sent me a picture,
Well, I
and
finally found it.
I wouldn't have been able to notice. I wouldn't have recognized that either. And I did build a system about a year ago.
I
So
think it's just a new system design, or like just
yeah.
the way this one was built. Because what I typically do, and again, we're on a nice little tangent here.
Hmm.
What I typically do is I'll buy a stock computer, and then over time I'll modify and customize it, right? So I
Sure.
have Dells that are like 10, 11 years old that are still pretty solid machines, right? Like,
Yep.
um, and because I've done that, right? I kind of take the chassis and I modify it, right? I
Yeah.
used to do that with
Mm.
cars, but that was um, younger days in BC before children. But the um, as I'm going through and I'm trying to like figure out where the heck is this hard drive, man? And, like, it was actually underneath by the power supply, which was
Oh my
completely,
gosh.
it was really
That makes
weird.
no sense.
Right. And was like, so, in traditional PC building fashion, the motherboard is at the bottom, straight up against the case. Everything's built up from that. On this
Yeah.
one, it was kind of, for lack of a better term, it was like in the basement, like below the motherboard. Really bizarre.
Wow.
And it's not a strange computer, although I suppose some people will argue. I got it at Costco. It was an iBuy Power BC, like, so it's
Mm.
got like the the funky kind of glass side. I think you like the one you built, right?
Yep.
But the point of that was, as I'm like going through trying to figure this out, and I'm watching this drama unfold, I started thinking like, the dependencies that I think a lot of companies have taken on OpenAI. I mean, even us, right? And like you
Yeah.
mentioned before, like the automation I do, a lot of the automation I do is centered around OpenAI, right? There's a lot of things that I take it a hit into. And even
Yeah.
like even when I was thinking of like a design, a picture I wanted to put out for an upcoming article, I generated it with a Dolly, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's the same company. Like, this is a problem, right? And I
Right.
think that, and it's a problem for more than just the obvious reasons. At
Yeah.
least the non-obvious reasons, as someone who was a Windows Phone developer, Silverlight developer, and Cortana, nearly a Cortana developer. Fortunately, my procrastination got me the better part of me on that one. Oh, and Band. I was gonna get a Band and write apps for that too.
Nice.
Right. The problem with relying on one company is not the obvious things. Is that company going to be solvent? Is this going to happen? Is that going to play at each one of these at every organization? Right. So, we don't know what it was. I
Right.
mean, there are rumors that a previous CEO of Microsoft, not the current one and not the founder, I'm not saying his names, was somebody because of he
Really?
scratched his
I
new
hadn't heard that.
car or something like accidentally. Yeah, it was a rumor, and I don't want to use the names, but like it was a former Microsoft executive had allegedly had opened the door or had some kind of thing in the parking lot where it scratched a former CEO's new Lincoln Town Car or whatever, and like he
Oh
was
wow.
always like on his case, but he never had like a legitimate like reason until one day he did, and then but like, I mean, these types of human type of interactions do happen, and you have to wonder,
Yeah.
like, this is really, particularly Microsoft, I think really found themselves with egg on their face, right? Because they basically threw everything all in on OpenAI, right? OpenAI,
Yeah.
Copilot this, right? And there was probably a massive WTF moment that, because Satya got involved pretty early on, like within about 6 hours,
Hmm.
right? Like everybody was
Hmm.
like, and for a partner like Microsoft and OpenAI for the board to do this without at least giving a heads up to their partners is very telling. Because
Yeah.
clearly
That's a
something went.
big part of the story, but I don't know what it means.
Well, I don't know what
But
it
it's
means either. Like,
definitely.
so you
Yeah.
have to wonder, and it's just like, you know, I'm not saying that they outsource their R&D to a third party, but they outsourced a big heavy lift of things because there's still Microsoft Research.
Yeah.
Microsoft Research does amazing things, but you have to wonder, like, they took a dependency pretty quickly. Now, yes, they were a major investor, but I have to
Yeah.
wonder. I wonder a lot of things about OpenAI, even before this, right? They're a nonprofit, but they seem to make an awful lot of money, right? And the whole thing of Elon Musk had said it more gracefully than I will, is that they were originally an open, they're not, for a company with open in their name, they're not particularly open, right?
Yeah. Well, my understanding is, and that's out there,
Mhm.
is that they did something that allowed part of them to remain nonprofit or not for profit, and another part of it to be for profit.
I
I'm
had
not
an
as
ex-girlfriend who worked for a nonprofit that made a lot of money in terms of
yeah.
research and things like that. And it's not necessarily shady. Like the way I said it kind of
No,
implied shady. It's a
no, and
legal.
I didn't mean that.
No,
I
it's a
just meant,
legal thing,
but
right?
I think
So
they did a thing where they carved out a portion, and I don't know if they issued stock. I assume they did because one of the pieces I read said that Altman didn't own any stock, and for a CEO, that's unusual.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Um,
things that just don't add up. Like it's just kind of like, well, that's weird. That's
yeah,
weird. And
yeah.
again, like for
So I don't
Microsoft
know.
gave them the number I'm thinking of is $10 billion, whatever the number is, and that's
Yeah, I
public
think it was
information.
13, but I'm not sure
Okay,
either.
so
We're in the same ballpark.
a fair bit of change, right? Maybe it's
Yes.
enough to buy a house in the Bay Area. Who knows? Um, but or pay for rent for a year in Manhattan. On a nice little
It's a
studio
tough room,
apartment.
I'm telling you. It's
Yeah.
it's tough around here. We're hard on the economy. Yes, we are.
But you have to wonder, like, if they gave them that much money, how come there were no Microsoft people on that board? Were there?
That
I don't know.
that's a
Like, I mean,
question.
it just
Maybe
seems
there
like
were. I don't know.
it seems like for them to be taken surprised by it, by hearing about it, like, I don't know. It
Yeah.
indicates to me that there weren't. So there's a lot of questions I have about kind of like, how was this run? How was this legally done? Like, not just done like saying they're doing anything illegally, but
Yeah,
what's that?
we're not saying there was anything wrong. We're just saying we hadn't heard.
Yeah, like what's
It's
going
the
on here?
information's public. We don't know it, and we haven't seen it yet. I haven't put enough time into it to really make a qualified,
Right.
to even ask a qualified question. I'd say
You know who probably
about it.
knows everything about this? And I'm
Who?
looking forward to reading the article. Mary Jo Foley.
Oh, yeah,
She's got to know what time it is. Now, whether or not she's allowed to say what's going on, well, only time will
possibly.
tell. But if anyone has a handle on this, it's got to be her. So
True.
shout out to Mary Jo Foley. Got to have her on the show. She's awesome.
Yeah, so that's two people we got to get on the show.
That's at least two people we got to get on
At
the
least
show.
two. We'll have to reach out to.
But I don't know. Like, I think my guess is that there are a lot of parties involved here that want to, now that he's back, they want to kind of pave over this and forget. But I think that is
Maybe that's best. I don't know.
I don't know. Like, I think that they have such an outsized influence on the direction of research in this space that as loath as I am to say regulations and transparent, like government enforced transparency, I don't know. I think it might be warranted here. Like, I think that we deserve to know as a species, because this is a very major development. And I don't know, like, I just kind of, it's interesting but I think that from my point of view, where I sit with my little red fedora, I think this is, and I said this on a call, right? I think this is, because everybody's like, what do you think of all this? Because it was a gathering of the AI minds. And I was like, this is a commercial for open source AI, right? Because, and I'm speaking as someone who wrote a Silverlight book, right? Who wrote a ton of Windows Phone apps, right?
Right.
There are things that happen out there that decisions that are made by large companies that have nothing to do with it, that majority to do with internal politics, and not what's good for the customer or the market
or the tech
especially the tech.
Yeah, that's true. And I would say, from a business perspective, there are business decisions that need to be made that impact all of those.
Right.
And they're legit, even though you may scratch your head when you see that pop out. And I saw that link from Thomas come into the comments.
Definitely have to check it out. I can't click on it.
Yeah.
From my Restream Studio thing here, but Thomas, thanks for watching, Thomas, and thanks for commenting.
Always.
That really helps. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. All that.
Absolutely. But sometimes there are business decisions that, when you first hear of, your first reaction is not positive.
Right.
I know, being a technical person in companies that I owned or partially owned, and then and also companies that I just work for, and then later it'll come out, well, this is what's going on. There's a competitor, making this claim, and to respond to that, we need to.
And I've been on the other side of that now, right? There are decisions that have been made. I'm not going to say where, but that I've had people kind of come to me and it's like, this is a terrible decision, and I was like, I felt that way too. But when you start pulling at it and you start realizing and you start gaming it out, while it's not ideal, it is better than the alternative, right? Because
Right.
Most people can be reasoned with that way. There are still people, again, not going to add any more
Yeah.
detail
And
to that, but
when that happens, and you find somebody that you can't reason with, you go,
right,
my favorite thing, my favorite response is, I understand.
right. I'm a little more sarcastic. There was
No
some who said
way.
way, and I was like, look, you are technically correct. Like if I had a time machine and
Mm,
I can go back 3 to 4 years, I would make a different decision 3 to 4 years ago. However,
right.
that one, if I did have a time machine with that capacity, I'd probably go have cappuccino with Leonardo da Vinci and or get the winning lottery numbers for $1 billion plus payout from the Mega Millions. Right, I wouldn't go back in time to
Yeah.
talk to this, but either way,
I
it's
wouldn't fix that.
right.
Right.
Like, I mean, I that would be pretty low on the list, right? Like,
Right.
but no, I get it, right? It's very easy to play armchair quarterback, which I think
Yeah.
maybe there was divine intervention that caused my hard drive to crash, right? Like, because I probably would have been very snarky at first, but you know what I mean? I don't know, but like, if you're right. There could be a perfectly rational reason for all of this,
Sure.
but it doesn't matter because if Microsoft takes a dependency on OpenAI, all these companies take a dependency on OpenAI, or they take
Yeah.
a dependency on Microsoft, who is taking a dependency on these things on OpenAI.
Right. There's a
You
little
now have
circular
a
going on
single
there.
point of failure
Exactly.
that causes a problem. And it's not like, if it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, there's usually a lot of brouhaha about it. But like the one I'm
Sure.
most familiar with would be when Node.js forked to IO.js, right? Because the way that the organization was managing Node.js made the community mad, right? I love the comment, Thomas. I'll
I
share
do
that in a
too.
second. But like, so what they did was like, well, it's open source, so we'll fork it. We'll create our own project, right? Now, sometimes that lasts for years, but in this case, it was more of a protest thing that kind of got Node to change the way they do things. There's no option to do that here with OpenAI, right?
Yeah.
Now, there are obviously other open source LLM models that are out there. There are
Yeah.
obviously other open source, image generation and all of that. But I think that what this last week has shown is, all of this crazy talk of open source this, and AI because it's important for humanity doesn't sound so crazy.
No.
A week into this, or less than a week. I think we're less than a week into this.
Yeah. 5 days at this point.
5 days, and um, it doesn't sound so crazy now, does it? And
No.
it's interesting to kind of see. Like, I'm sure that well, one, I'd love to be a fly on the wall on that meeting that he had when he goes back to the board. That must have been. I'd love to
Yeah.
be a
I
fly
don't.
on the wall in that conversation.
But
Um,
I love your emphasis on the single point of failure. I mean,
right.
that's technically, that's engineering 101
Mhm.
is, you don't want to make it so one thing breaks and it takes down the whole system.
Right.
But you're right. It definitely brought that to the forefront. You mentioned I didn't try openai.com or .org over the
Oh yeah,
weekend.
that's right. It was
You
broken.
mentioned there was
Yeah.
some outages you were
And I thought it
experiencing.
was just me, but then like I saw on X, Twitter, whatever it's called this
Yeah.
week, Robert Scoble was like, "Oh no, it's still down for me. It's down for you." Like it was this whole like, "Is it down for you? Is it down for me?"
Wow.
And the timing seems a little sus, as the kids would say. But
Yeah.
it just goes to show. Well, I mean, if 90% of the company is threatening to walk off, and they want to send a message, I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah. I don't think it was malicious.
Right. Or
Openly,
maybe
actively
people were logging
malicious.
into it to get their stuff off of it. Like maybe it was
Right.
because there is
So
a way to
there's
download
that.
all your data on there. And I think I
Right.
even told you that. I was like, look,
You
you could
did.
probably
And
pull
I
your
was like,
stuff
I
out.
don't really have anything that
Right.
I need to take down, but
There were prompts in
that's a
there. There were prompts in there I wanna keep.
got you.
Because I kind of figured out some good prompt engineering stuff with it. But
So, this would, I'm gonna throw this out there and I might add a link here. I've got YouTube running with us live on the other side. I
Mhm.
may send you the link for this, but there is a channel. In fact, I'm going to do it. There's a channel that I follow that does a pretty much weekly um, update on this, and they look at
Is that Lev's thing?
it's Lev,
Lev.
and he looks at the Hugging Face um, leaderboard, AI leaderboard. So I'm going to drop this in our chat if I can. Let's see. I'm watching, right? Okay, let me do live chat. And can I guess I can't post. All right, I'm going to send it to you through another means.
Or yeah, we'll figure it out.
I sent it to you there.
Get the link out.
You should have got it. But yeah, Lev does a good show, and he does it almost every Friday is when he posts it. He does it live,
right?
And it's a invitation only type group right now. But Lev's a data scientist of Russian descent. He's a PhD, and I met him because I got to work with him.
Right.
Yeah, and
there it is.
I love what he does. He's talking through all of up there. It is Lev's YouTube. So scan that QR code. That's awesome, Frank.
Yeah, they just added it to Restream.
Oh
no, Lev's a great. I haven't met him personally, but like I've sat in on some of his calls. And I'm like, oh, he's a smart guy, and he has that rare gift that a lot of smart people don't have, which is the ability to explain stuff in a way that makes sense, right? So
yeah,
like and he does something like you said every Friday, more or less. And but I'd be curious to, well, again, a third person we got to have on the show. And speaking of show, I interviewed I think it would have been last Friday, right before the hard drive crashed. Very interesting guest. We're going to get that show out. He was very loose of the profanity. So,
okay.
Well, I mean, the show goes on for about an hour, but we were on the phone for like 2 hours, 2.5.
Oh, wow.
Hours. Like he's an interesting guy, to say the least.
Okay.
And
yeah, I saw it come up and couldn't make it. And I'm trying to remember now why I couldn't make it.
You had a bunch of meetings or whatever.
I think I was working.
Yeah. We're having a lot of bookings is like, again, like, so one, thanks, we are close to Thanksgiving. I will highlight Thomas's comment.
Yes.
Be sure to set.
Yeah, let's get that up because that's a funny comment. This. I'm going to do that, Thomas.
Remember to set your scales back 10 pounds tonight for the Thanksgiving holiday. With Microsoft Bookings, so we use this tool called Microsoft Bookings. It's included with the Office 365, Microsoft 365 professional package, which I own. And it's like Charlie Brown, Lucy, and the football. Like every time, I swear, right? So we were. I don't know if we talked about this on the live stream, but there was like so what we needed to do. It turns out getting a scheduling system that can look at your calendars, my calendars.
We don't have that yet, do we?
You could set it up, but you've been very cautious about sharing your calendars or something like that.
Have I?
Yeah,
I'll share my calendar with you. How's that? Would that work?
It should work. So what we needed to do is somebody goes, hey, I want to be a guest on the show. And they go to the site and they say, it's on datadriven.tv/be our guest or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you click on it. It should find a time slot that takes into account your calendar, my calendar, and presumably, well, the person would have to do that part. Right.
Yeah.
And then not only schedule it, but block time on your calendar and my calendar, as well as, and this apparently is the bridge that's too far this week, attach a Teams link meeting invite. That apparently, but the funny thing is that I've been off and on with everything else going on in my world, which we went into in previous shows, looking into an alternative, right? And yes, Calendly could do this, but then I have to buy Calendly Enterprise, and it becomes a cost issue. I already have Office M365, whatever they're calling it this week, right? So like that's a no added cost, right? So so we had a call that the guest actually canceled, and then I had on my list of research on like how to do this calendar testing, and then lo and behold, it did everything it was supposed to do.
I rember all of a
So
sudden, like, too.
You and I were like, wow,
What
got
happened?
it. It finally works as advertised. So I'm like, well, I guess I can put that away, like from my to-do list.
Sure.
And then again, like Lucy and Charlie Brown in the football, which for those of you, am I saying that a person would be less challenging than software? I think that depends on the software and depends on the person.
I have to agree. That's a good answer. It depends.
That is the universal consultant question or IT question. But so I'm like, oh, I guess they whatever they did in Microsoft land, they finally figured it out. So we don't have to move platforms.
Right.
Which would be a not trivial exercise anyway, right? So
Sure.
I'm like, okay, well, it works. And then lo and behold, like we've had a couple of meetings get scheduled now. Nope, Teams, it's on your calendar, it's on my calendar. That 2 out of 3.
Right.
But it doesn't include a Teams link, right? So to quote Meatloaf, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but it's still not. I don't know. Like we're not trying to cure cancer here. We're not trying to like set up a Mars colony. Like this should not be this complicated, right? I don't know what's going on
concur.
with like if anyone within the sound of my voice works on bookings, please talk to me. Am I doing something wrong? It's entirely possible. I said, but I haven't touched the system in about 8 months, and it will randomly do things. So I doubt it's something I did because I haven't done anything. So, but anyway, that's the segue. So, having a single point of failure is something that, like you said, engineering. Our single point of failure is our calendaring system right now.
Yeah, right now.
Right, and
that's the one we've been battling for. Gosh, a year.
Yeah, I would say about a year because it worked fine, then it didn't work, and then it started working, and then so it's kind of like. And for those of you who don't get the Charlie Brown, Lucy, and the football reference, it's from the Peanuts, Charles Schultz, and there's Charlie Brown is the main character, and he, and again, football being American football, right? Like,
yes,
he as he goes to kicks it, she pulls it away, and he ends up falling flat in his face. So it's kind of like that's how I feel with Microsoft bookings. It's like. Every time I think it's almost like it's like this weird quantum entanglement thing. If I think about leaving it, it'll work. If I'm committed to staying with it, it'll fail. So maybe they're doing some quantum computing research with this. I don't know.
Satellites reading your mind.
There you go. But it's so I forget how we got on that sidetrack. Was it who was the guy we interviewed? Oh God, we had one of the best shows, and it was an impromptu show. He had got laid off. He's in Atlanta. Can't think of his name. You know who I'm talking about, right?
I can't think of his name.
Yeah,
I can't think of who it was. I'm drawing a blank on the show.
Oh, okay. So it was. So anyway, he's like, "You guys go off road so much. You should think about sponsoring an off road racing team." And I'm like, that'd be kind of fun.
Maybe.
Because we do that. So, what is this? Nope, I play with it. Citizen friendly.
Bookings.
I'm assuming he's talking about bookings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like something that it's not engineering friendly. That's a good way to put it, right? Like, there's not a lot of customization hooks and things like that. And I actually, I don't know. Like we're going to get that worked out one way or the other. There used to be a product called Cortana, Cortana X or something like that, which was you would basically email her and it would work out through natural language to find the best meeting time possible, and it would block out the calendar. Sadly, that product was shelved, because it was a single, somebody in a corner office somewhere decided to kill the product. Right now, maybe it didn't have the adoption because they didn't really promote it well. Who knows? But it is what it is. But that's why I think that for the open source alternatives, I think that's how we start talking about Hugging Face, right? Like if there was turmoil at, makers of not Model X, because then that's like a Tesla, but large language model, this large language model had, turmoil in the company that built it, well, you would at
Yep.
least have the option of lift and replace. Obviously, that's a way dramatic oversimplification, but the fact that this stuff isn't out in the open is, I
It's
think,
fair.
I
Yeah, it's
don't
fair
know.
because of that, Frank.
I think in a lot of
So
ways, it makes my job easier in the coming
I
months because
I
I can
feel
always.
you. Yeah. I I've got to run in a few minutes,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's okay. It's not bad. But I do I got a couple of things to do before another meeting coming up. Um, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. I had an announcement,
Uh-oh.
a business announcement. I'm pretty sure you knew because I was telling you about it before I did
Oh,
this
okay.
launch. I didn't know if you wanted, if it was okay for me to share, or
Sure. It's okay.
because we
I'm
talk
afraid.
about our businesses. Yeah. So about a year ago, I built. We were talking about this earlier. I built this machine, and I did it so I could start to play more with data sciencey, AI, machine learning stuff. And I didn't really publicize it other than just saying I was building a machine. A few friends, I did put out one message where I gave some stats on the components I put in it, and a couple of friends reached out to me and said, "That's kind of beefy. What are you doing?" And you need beefy to do this. It turns out it wasn't beefy enough at the time to do some of the stuff I wanted to, but the AI market and machine learning and all of this in general has actually been on a crazy accelerated pace. And I didn't get a big enough GPU at the time, but 5 months later, it was big enough to run some of the models locally and play around with training and that sort of stuff. And so what grew out of this was that this plus listening as a data engineering company, Enterprise Data and Analytics as an data engineering company, and a lot of my customers were doing data engineering to beef up and get their capacity up and speed up so that they could start looking at large language models specifically, and that came up in meetings, and it kept coming up, and finally, just over the fall here, I decided to open a new venture rather than tack this on to the data engineering company. I started an AI company, and it's called Enterprise Data and AI, which is kind of in line with
Nice.
enterprise data and engineering, or sorry, and analytics. And it's now we've got kind of the whole span going. We've got from the data engineering part now all the way through the other use case. And as you know, data engineering is codified in our podcast guests saying to us over and over again, first you get the data, which there may be another announcement forthcoming. We'll see. But
Yeah,
but yeah,
somebody should register that domain name.
I think someone did already. First you get the data.com.
Yeah,
It
that's
wasn't
right. They
me.
point to data driven. It points to data driven because you
Yep.
were at pass and you were like, oh, you should, does it point to anything? And I was like, nah, I just reserved it. And they're like, make it point to something. And I was like, oh, okay, Eddie's up to something. But like to your point, right? So let me see if I can share this screen. Cancel. It's Shift F5, not Control F5. Bear with me. I know you got to go. So
Yeah, it's
I
okay.
want to
I'm
show
good.
you.
Thank you, Thomas.
No, that's cool. No, I wasn't sure like how far along you were with that, but I mean, it's a smart business move because AI is gonna,
It's a soft launch, and I mean the
you know,
fact that I'm talking about it the day before
right,
Thanksgiving on a live stream is also a soft launch.
right.
So,
So,
but
so
yeah,
this
the
is,
hierarchy of data needs. There you go. Yeah,
I mean, if you let me see if I can get this to the point where we're not blocking a big chunk of the slides. There we go.
there we go.
Um,
Yeah,
so this is actually a slide from the event I spoke at last week, where it was kind of like this
congrats. By the
idea.
way, I saw that.
Thank you.
Big deal.
Two hosts, two coasts,
There you go.
which was we both kind of streamed from there. So it's basically this idea, and I talk this a lot when I talk to data scientists, right? Because data scientists always tend to think about the top of the pyramid, right? And I
Hmm.
guess keeping in mind that there are going to be some people watching this listening to this rather than watching that, I basically ripped off Abraham Maslow, right? With the whole idea of, and there's a LinkedIn article I wrote on this where it's like, to get to AI, you have to have a solid data science practice, right? Or data engineering practice. To get to that
Yeah.
point, you need to have solid. Um, um, I love that comment. Starting to drool, ringing Maslow's bell before this episode as well. I like that. But and then it requires services, which in itself requires storage, which in itself requires hardware and networking, right? This is the top of the pyramid right now. And if you wanted to be technical about it, the Gen AI would be towards the top of that. Right. And all of this is to say, like, we really need to think about security in this too, right? Because
absolutely,
when I first said that's not it, there we go. We have to think about security as part of every part of this because I see the training data to train these large language models as a giant attack surface.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when I first kind of posited that maybe 8 months ago, I kind of got the side eye where you can tell what they were thinking was you're a little crazy. And then here we go. It's happening.
Yes.
Right. And even more interesting is the artists that are adding bits to their online art. So it would screw up any kind of scraper to pull it in. I haven't gotten the details on it, but it's the idea that now there is for lack of a better term, a security exploit, right? Or a vulnerability that's now out in the wild that's being intentionally deployed, not for malicious reasons, but to fight against any kind of unauthorized scraping.
Yeah.
Which is so like we are really in the pre-Napster days of this in terms of copyright law and things like that.
I like the adjective. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think there's going to be, of course, you mentioned law. They always legislation always lags behind the tech, and usually it's motivated by bad actors, people doing things they really know they shouldn't be doing, but they're like, "Hey, there's no law against this," and it's like,
right.
I get it, but at the same time, we're in the beginning days of this, and having a few conversations with people. You, Frank, you knew about this beforehand. Some friends of ours who Nick's been on the show. Just trying to hash out. Kevin Hazard has been on the show, just kind of hashing out some of this and getting phenomenal advice and stuff that I, of course, would never consider. That's why it's good to have friends. I don't need a board. I've got friends.
Well, yeah, and
talking about this, where a couple of people said the same thing, and I found it intriguing. One of them said we're in 1993 for IT. And another said 1992. And we've been there. We were around during that period and we saw all this. And the comparison is striking. That was very much the beginning of things. This stuff has happened between now and 92, 93 that no one.
What's changed the world? Like you can't imagine. Like, so, when he was 10, I said to my now 13-year-old, like, we had to go burn a CD. And his vision of what burning a CD was, apparently he thought it actually meant fire.
Right.
But then he turned to me and said something very profound. What's a CD?
Oh, wow.
That's brutal.
Wow. I'll say this. I heard something recently, kind of way off topic, but I'll bring it back. Mm-hmm. One guy did predict a lot of this, even in the 90s, and his name was George Gilder, and he's an interesting. I won't call him a polymath because he's not. It's not dedicated to scientific thinking, but he's kind of a cultural equivalent of a polymath.
Interesting.
And he made a lot of calls about this way early. He's not quite a futurist, and he is unpopular for some of his claims. He's been called many, many names by people who disagree with him in the culture. But George,
that happens a lot, though.
George Gilder. Well,
I'll have to check.
But he did. He's the first person that I've read about back during that time who made some of these predictions about stuff that's wildly popular and taken for granted now, but at the time just didn't exist.
Well, no, it's a good point. Like, we have it's. I mean, just to think of what's happened in the last year with
Yeah,
this, with AI,
absolutely.
and then you kind of see that how quickly that unraveled in the last 5 days, right? It went
Right.
from OpenAI was untouchable to now they're, I mean, they're vulnerable, and it was 100% self-inflicted. And I also
Absolutely.
ponder, like, next week is AWS's big conference reInvent, which I won't be there this year for
Right.
family reasons mostly, but generative AI is a huge part of that show, right? And
Sure.
they have Bedrock, they have Party Rock, like there's all these things that they're putting out now,
Mhm.
where I think a week or two ago it would have been like, but OpenAI owns that space. There's no hope.
Mm.
Like a lot of people said, at AWS is no hope. Amazon has no hope here. And then this happens. Is like
Goes
I
to
think
show
this
you,
is
right? You never
goes to show
know.
you, like, predicting the future is hard.
It
And
is.
um, mostly it seems like AWS has thrown in with Anthropic to be kind of their large language model provider. But
Yeah.
if AWS is smart, and I suspect that they are, they're going to realize, like,
What do you
what,
have?
not saying that there's any kind of drama going to unfold there, but
Right.
like, anybody with half a brain would realize, we saw this happen. Now how do we mitigate this?
Right.
It's a very, the fact that this happened, I think, obviously there's the short term obvious stuff, but there's also kind of like these other things that people are going to scratch their chins. And
Right.
and I think it's smart to build your practice, because a lot of the shift now is going to be towards these
It's
AI. And
definitely going on.
you know
There's an impetus and a good example right now,
right,
5 day old example to
5 day
bring
old.
some of
Well,
this in house
or not just in
on
house, but
premise.
make it more flexible, right?
Yeah.
The on premise story, I mean, open source makes it a lot more easy to go on premise, right? And I say this from
Well, it does. I
self-interested
mean,
reasons,
all cards on the table, Frank.
right?
There's a. I hear
The kids must be home because it's a half
I
day.
see. There's a somewhat of a move where people have gone to the cloud, and I've been seeing this more and more here lately. It's
Mhm.
come from some customers, and I may get some work out of it. I haven't yet, where they made to jump into the cloud, and it wasn't quite the fit for them that they thought it might be. Not
Right.
not saying anybody was bad or wrong or ugly or malicious or inaccurate intentionally. It just didn't work. And sometimes the costs were more than were expected. And occasionally the costs were just more, flat out more. And they're like, because of combination of circumstances, this isn't working for us. And a lot of those customers beginning to pull back. And I see Microsoft responding to it. I think one of the motivators for offering access to SQL Server managed instance for a year for free was
Mhm.
kind of motivated by that, because a lot of people were getting surprised by things. One thing I ran into with a client that I was surprised about is, I can do a lot of things with managed instance that I can do with SQL Server on premises, but I can't do a database snapshot. And those things are crazy fast for large databases. And a
Right.
lot of data engineering relies on that to drive a literal stake in the ground. I call it a poor man's transaction, right? Here's a copy of this database as it was at this date and time. And then they start running all of their ETL against that instead of the transactional database that's out there.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
it's a
yeah, yeah.
killer
So it
move,
becomes,
right? And
it surprises me you can't do that in
well, you
MI.
kind of can, but where it takes a few minutes on premises. The last time I looked at it, and granted, this is 5-6 months ago,
Mhm.
they had something like this in preview for managed instance, but on a largest database, the difference was a few minutes versus 6 or 7 hours. And
What?
then I was told that, well, no, it's not that bad. It can be faster than that because of different things that you can do. Of course, it's some of those things involve just adding money. And
Well, yeah.
But then they're only talking a couple of 3 hours, but still, that's not a few minutes.
That seems
This was not
lopsided.
something we were thinking about
Right.
in the current process, right? The snapshots
Right.
just worked. And we thought they would also just work. So it was the workaround wasn't crazy because they were using patterns for their ETL, and they were just able to update to a better pattern, an incremental load pattern that only went after data that had changed or was new. And they didn't have to before. It didn't matter. They had a snapshot. They could do what they wanted to. There was no traffic on it but them. So, hey, I like that, Frank.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was hoping I could do that in preview while you were talking.
That's okay.
There you go. There's no sound to it. I have to re-render it.
Oh, I like it. Happy Thanksgiving
Cool.
from the Data Driven Podcast, which is Frank and I, but also all of you. Thank all of you.
Yeah, we really appreciate people who've been listening. Season 8. I was thinking the other day, like, we're like 18, 19 episodes into season 7. And like, if we're not that far off from season 8,
yeah,
hopefully we won't disappoint people like Game of Thrones did in season 7.
Stuff happens, and we do our very best every time. So hopefully,
but no, we actually, our numbers are going up.
They are
clearly. Yep. So, no, I'm right there with you in terms of, the importance of controlling your data and controlling your destiny. Like
right.
They are one and the same. And while it is easy and tempting to outsource that, right? I even seen that myself, right? Like, where I naively thought that all my WordPress data was being backed up and secured.
Well, and technically it was.
Well, it was, but it was, yeah. I mean, it was just like, and I keep going back to that, but like, you can't, because every time I said like, oh, my data was erased, and you're like, but isn't it in the cloud? And like anyone that's, but wasn't it in the cloud? Like I think we put a lot more expectations on that.
Yeah.
But even like when I'm experimenting now with OpenShift, because I'm trying to learn OpenShift and Kubernetes and kind of all that DevOpsy stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of an impediment to things I want to build. And it's important for my work too. Setting up a VM and setting up these environments in the cloud it's not expensive. It's not free.
Sure.
And I ended up buying the PowerEdge server, which I talked about, like build up my own home lab because, I haven't had a chance to work on it, but you know what? I'm still making the money, like it just, it becomes if you get a used server, you can get one for under $300. I think all up, I spent about $310 for new hard drive and these stupid little brackets.
Yeah.
The server needs for the hard drives.
But in addition to that, I mean, the market is adjusting, and like I said, Microsoft made that announcement about MI. They also some of their offerings, and by the way, Microsoft doesn't ever get credit for integration and UI. I think they've never gotten credit for that they deserve, and
that is the stuff that they are really great at. They are arguably better than anyone else.
Agreed. And so
I would say up until Databricks, they were the single best. Nobody came close.
Yeah.
Databricks, and even then, arguably Azure did. Like there was a lot of cross pollination there too.
Sure,
so like in terms of like how that goes, they are second to none. Like if you look at they're I've had to deal with some non-Microsoft tools.
Yes.
I'm not going to name names, but like, it's like, you really should hire some graphic design.
Well, and what they've done and what they demoed, at least in the keynote I saw on Wednesday morning at the Past Summit, the opening keynote, they have done what they do best. They put these wrappers and UIs around large language models. The integration with Copilot that they were demonstrating in that talk was amazing. I don't know if that talk's online for free. Sometimes they'll put part of it online and then they'll blank out stuff because they don't want everybody. They don't want the competition to read them. But again, they've kind of
there's also copyright issues too. There's copyright issues too.
But
I was at Mix one year, which is an old conference, and like they had to blank it out, and I found out why.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But I mean, it's it's really cool, and it's accelerating people to get started with it. It was frankly one of the reasons why I said, all right, it's time to jump. I had this
Right.
planned for the AI company for a long time, and it it made sense. It was one of the pieces that said, yep. And I announced it on Saturday on my blog,
Cool.
andyleonard.blog. So just ask any librarian. Yeah, absolutely,
Um,
Tom. I got
we
to
definitely got to
run.
have Tom on. We have to have Tom on us on the show about
Oh,
this
you're
privacy
absolutely
management
right
thing.
about the copyright law. So I
Yeah.
got to run, Frank.
So
But
do
thanks
I.
for inviting me and doing these live streams, even when I can't
Ah,
make
no
it.
problem.
And it's always great information. So I appreciate
Cool,
you,
man.
brother.
It's always good to catch up with you. Have a good Thanksgiving, everyone. Thank you, Thomas, for commenting live. Let us know what you think about all this drama with OpenAI, and will open source kind of mitigate these risks? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. And time for me to find the outro graphics. Goodbye, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.